Hi and welcome. I'm Dr. Keefe. I'm an assistant teaching professor in ecology, behavior, and evolution at University of California, San Diego. And today I want to talk about the decision you might have as an undergrad to join a research lab. Specifically, we're going to talk about the following. First, is joining a research lab the best choice for you? Second, what does work in a lab look like? What are the expectations on you as a student researcher, and what expectations should you have of the lab that you're working in? And then finally, how do you find one? How do you find an opportunity? It's an exceptionally daunting task to maybe not know what you're looking for in a research lab or the intimidation of talking to a faculty member. We're going to walk through that scenario, show you some resources, and go through a step-by-step process where you can find the right position for you. So first question, before you decide on going and applying for a lab, ask yourself, is this the best choice for me and what my goals are as an undergraduate? Avoid the checklist mentality. So let's say that you're an undergraduate hoping to go to dental school or medical school or become a researcher. You might have looked on a subreddit or online and seen that, hey, if you want to have a serious application, then you need at least 2 years of undergraduate research. You need to join this club, and a laundry list of lots of things that are checklists on applications. I'm here to tell you that it is all about quality over quantity. And having a research experience that doesn't quite fit your interests, or something that you're not interested in, or really dive and put all your energy into, when you're in that lab, it will be a waste of time and just an empty check mark on that application. So please avoid that checklist mentality and instead look for something that will give you a valuable experience. College is an intellectual buffet, right? And whenever you show up at a buffet, you don't necessarily know what is tastiest or what you want to fill your plate up with. You don't go over to the potatoes and just pile it up full of potatoes. You sample a little bit of everything so that by the time you're on your second or third plate, you know exactly you want to go for that prime rib and crab legs. And it's kind of the same thing in college, is to have a lot of different experiences so that you can, in real time, see what opportunities might be like. You have an idea in your head of what it might be like to be a researcher or do well in a class or join a club or be a physician. But taking a volunteer experience, joining a club, being in the classroom, those are all opportunities that can help you experience in a much more accurate way, hey, is this the right thing for me? So sample a whole bunch of different things and pour in your effort intentionally when you find things that really do match up with your goals, your interests, and your passions. So ask yourself how conducting research serves your goals. So ask yourself how conducting research actually satisfies those long-term goals you have set for yourself in college. Why do research? What are some reasons why you might want to join a research lab? Well, for one, if you are considering being a professional researcher, and this could be getting a master's degree, this could be getting a PhD or an MD where you will be doing research. There are many different avenues from this, but if you want to become a professional researcher, then it's pretty important that you join a lab and get that valuable experience relatively early on. Now, a misconception is that if this is your goal, that you need to start in your first year. That is definitely far from the case. But if you want to go and eventually join a competitive PhD program, having 2 or 3 years of strong research experience is going to be highly valuable. Let's just say, in the case before of you wanting to go into medical school, maybe becoming a clinician, it might not be super important that you gain that experience so that you can do future science. You might not be on grants. You might not be publishing papers. But if you are a scientist consuming information, it really helps to gain the perspective of what it takes to do research and what you should look for in an experimental design or data analysis that makes the results of that journal article that you're using to influence your practice What makes that strong evidence or weak evidence? And sometimes the best way of doing that is to have that experience yourself. And then lastly, you just don't know yet. Keep in mind, you're at that buffet, and whether this is your first round or third round going to the buffet table at UCSD or some other college, if you don't know specifically yet what the next step is, this is a good way to really see, hey, is research something that is right for me? So what does work in a lab look like? Well, let's talk about the typical cast of characters that you might see in a biology lab at an R1 university or big research university. First off, we have the principal investigator, also known as the professor, and they're going to be the one running the lab. If you look at their website, it's usually going to be their lab with their last name. And this is going to be the leader or supervisor of the whole lab in its entirety. There are also staff scientists. This can include lab managers or professional scientists that are typically working for a salaried position. They may have and likely do have an advanced degree, like a PhD. Often in this case, this is not always the case, but they won't be supervising undergrads, and that they may have a job focused on a larger responsibility within the lab. So for example, if your lab does a lot of sequencing or uses complex imaging software and hardware, then it might be a staff scientist that is in charge of that equipment for all projects. A lab manager also is going to be in charge of logistics for the lab, say ordering reagents, making sure everything is running smoothly. You're typically, as an undergrad, not going to be working for them. However, postdocs, which are individuals that have finished grad school and have their PhDs and are now in a research lab working on their own projects, and PhD students themselves, these are probably going to be the individuals that you're interacting with most in a large lab. There may also be master's students. One thing at UCSD is we have the BS-MS program, where if you are volunteering in a lab, you can then continue on in that lab as a master's student, getting your thesis completed, continuing your research. And often this is a great program to choose if either you don't know what step you want to take next, or you want to really prepare yourself for that next stage. Whether that is going into industry or a different advanced degree program like medical school, dental school, PA school, or so on. What does work in a lab look like? Let's talk a little bit about lab culture. What are your responsibilities? When you join a lab, you're going to be at the beginning given a set of responsibilities, and often these are going to be task-based. So instead of coming in for a certain specific time window, say 9 to 12, they know you're an undergraduate and that you have classes, and things vary from week to week and month to month. But in general, you're going to have a list of responsibilities where you're responsible for taking care of it that particular day or that particular week. Now, depending on the state of an experiment, these might be in really restricted time blocks, and it might be quite costly if you don't fulfill those responsibilities. So one thing that is highly important when you join a lab is just knowing that when you are assigned responsibilities, definitely ask questions if you're unsure about what those responsibilities are, and then communicate, and to the best of your ability, fulfill those responsibilities. They're going to start off small at first, and then over time, you might have the opportunity to allow those to grow and expand and even gain more independence. There's going to be some sort of time commitment. What I say to students is that when you make the decision to join a lab, ask yourself, do I have an extra 10 to 15 hours per week that I could budget to research and not let my studies slip and still have time for personal care and wellness? If the answer to that is, yeah, I think so, then research is a good time. This is one of the reasons why I don't think starting off early in your first year is a good idea, because it's still really hard to understand what your social and academic budget is. Growth and independence. At first, there will be relatively little independence. You're probably going to be given relatively straightforward tasks, and often the growth in that position and gain of independence is going to rest on your shoulders. Meaning that if you want to learn more about what's going on in lab, if you want to be able to help somebody do a new experiment or learn a new technique, then that's going to be on you to come forward and ask. Just be truly enthusiastic and curious. Hey, you're working on this project. What are you doing? I would love to help you out. And if that's something that, that works for them and their project and for you, then you might start to gain that independence and start to learn additional techniques. And so one important thing to never forget is how important you are. There's really no bigger reason you're in this lab other than to benefit you and your goals, to learn new techniques, to get mentorship. So if you feel that the lab experience is either toxic or it's not giving you what you want, or other aspects of your student and personal life are suffering because of what's happening in the lab, even though these cases are rare, they do happen. Just know that you are the most important one, and not to feel like there is some pressure to stick it out or be there for the remainder of your undergrad years. It is okay to ask for what you need, and it is okay for you to leave a lab. Existing opportunities. How do you find a lab? This can be incredibly hard and daunting at first. Now, in general, we're going to talk about two different ways that you can find an opportunity in a lab. One of those ways is to look for scholarships or organizations or programs that can team you up with a mentor, a research professor, and you don't have to find them, you don't have to establish that relationship, or that might allow you to receive funding and training through a mentor that you yourself have found. I'm going to go through some of those programs at UCSD, but I'm sure if you're from another institution and watching this, similar things probably exist there. And then after this, we'll talk about cold emails. What happens if you just want to go out and reach and connect with a research professor all on your own, outside of one of these opportunities? We'll talk about how that process works. So what are some existing opportunities? One is the BioSci Success Center, Bump Program, the Real Portal, Undergraduate Research Hub, and there are a lot of programs outside of UCSD. One example would be the National Science Foundation's REU programs. Now for each one of these, I'm going to go onto their website and show you where you can find some of these opportunities, what they are, and I'll also leave links to all of these down in the description. First, we have the Real Portal, and here we can see a listing of jobs. Now, most of these are not going to be paid. I believe some might be, but here we have undergraduate student researchers. You can see hours a week, duration, things that you need to upload, skills and qualifications. And I would go and check these out. You can filter based on your year. So even some of these are aimed at first-year students. And you can go and apply to these. Now, one thing that I would keep in mind with any of these opportunities is that there is going to be quite a bit of competition. So that being said, I think one of the important things as you start looking through these opportunities is, one, definitely apply early, apply with the most professional and well-formatted, complete application you can, and potentially also reach out through email to the lab itself once you've applied, just alerting you as to who you are. So this is a great place to find research opportunities that are posted by individual labs. We also have a lot of programs through either the university or the School of Biological Sciences. So if you search Undergraduate Research Hub on UCSD's website, you'll see a large number of programs. And I'm not going to go through all of these in particular, but you can see the list: Camp, Empower, Faculty Mentor Program, LAP, McNair, Trell, Start Neuro. And for all of these, one of the things to really look for with each one, what kind of research are they doing? Like, what kind of program? Some of these are going to be multi-year opportunities. Some of these are going to be just for the summer. Some you have to have a mentor ahead of time. Some they will pair you up with one. Apply to these programs, whether it's these or ones that I'm about to show you online or others that you find yourself. There is no reason to not apply for any of these programs that fit your needs and goals. Even if you don't think that you have a chance of winning, there's imposter syndrome, there's negativity bias, there are all these thoughts that are often telling us insidiously that if we do it, what's the chance that I'll actually get it? Why would I get this award? I want to tell you that you can get these, and the worst that can happen if you apply is that you don't get it. But the best is that you can apply, get it, and this could be the opportunity potentially that fosters a brand new interest, makes huge connections that bring you to that next stage in knowing what you want to do, what your passions are, and how to be successful in your career. So with that dynamic, the pros definitely outweigh the cons. You can do it. Apply for these. If there's one message that comes out of all of this, is go for it. Fill out the application, be on time, follow all the instructions, and just go for it. Another organization within biological sciences at UCSD is the BUMP program. And so I'll also put this link in the description below. But if you go to opportunities, you can see that it lists other either events or research activities: the Amgen Scholars Program, the STAR Summer Training Program, SACNAS, the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans in Science, where they have an amazing conference that happens every year. Lots of opportunities. And there's also the BUMP Research Apprenticeship Program. This is great because you can see down below that this is going to help kind of really start from scratch if you don't know kind of who you're looking for and you want to really get involved in science. And not only does this include scholarship money, this includes a lot of resources to get started. Other research opportunities you can find at the Bio Student Success Center. On the research opportunities page, if you scroll on down, you can see some broader things of how to locate research opportunities, research for academic credit. When you are in a lab, you can get course credit for doing so, how to fund your research. And something that I really enjoy about this website is if you look at careers and internships, you can also look at a whole listing of internships and job openings, especially something that you could do in the summer in local biotech. Up here on the Mesa in La Jolla, there are so many biotech companies. Many of them have very close relationships to the university. I highly recommend checking out some of these websites and seeing what they do and if it fits your needs. And then finally, I want to talk about the National Science Foundation's Research Experiences for Undergraduates, or REU programs. Now, some of these are going to be through UCSD, but most of them are outside of the university, giving you the opportunity for a number of weeks or longer to travel to another school, be in another lab, and learn some really valuable information. So if you want to go to the REU site, once again, I'll put the link in the description down below, but you just search for the REU site. You can say biological sciences. And once again, you can export these, maybe look and see what city they're in, so site location, but it lists the university, it lists what they're doing. So we have Raptor Research at Boise State, Boston University, Control of Gene Expression for Biological Effect. And you go ahead and apply, click on one of these, California Academy of Sciences. You go to their website. This is the Cal Academy Summer Systematics Institute. And you can see what this program is all about, see what the application is right, and if it is like, and see if it is something for you. But what if you want to go about it on your own and find a lab on your own? Maybe none of these are working for you, or you want to do this as a corollary to applying to some of these programs. You want to find a lab. How do you go about doing that? Well, I'm going to give you a few tasks that I think help start this process. One, think about specific potential research topics that you're interested in. Maybe it's cancer biology, maybe it's gene editing, maybe it's ecological research, climate change. Think about things that you're interested in doing and might have a connection to what you want to do down the road in your career. If you don't know what your career aspirations are yet, think about things that you would find interesting or applicable to your coursework. Next, list the common techniques used in that research. So often, if you were to say, look at the research description of what faculty in cell biology or neurobiology or genetics are doing, you might think that, oh, these topics are completely different. If I learn techniques in this lab, then how is that going to apply to any other lab? And if you're working on cells, there are going to be a handful of core techniques that, regardless of what lab you're working in, these are going to be very common techniques that are good to know. In the case of genetics, that could be doing PCR or prepping stuff for DNA sequencing, like DNA extraction. You might be running gel electrophoresis or Western blots. You might be creating thin slices of mice. There are lots of different procedures that are often going to be common between labs. So list the common techniques used in that research and ask yourself, are these techniques that I want to be trained in? And then once you have that, you can start creating a list of potential principal investigators, PIs, labs that you want to reach out to. So what I'd like to do now is go through that process with you, go online, and go through an example of what you might look for on a PI's webpage and how to find the webpage in the first place. So here we are on the School of Biological Sciences webpage, and you can do this for your own home department. You can do this at a research institute that's close by. Examples at UCSD are the Salk Institute or the medical school. You can go to the research arm and you can search faculty. I like to go to research topics. And so here we see it broken up into general research topics. I would go ahead and pick one that you are most interested in. So let's choose cancer biology. And what will commonly happen is the same way if you look at Salk or other research institutes, is that within this topic, they'll list faculty that do something related to this. Now, at this point, you might notice that there are lots of people, and where do you go? So a little bit about terminology. First off, if someone is a professor emeritus, then they still might be doing research or writing, but they're largely retired, meaning that they're probably not going to be running a large research lab, and there might be fewer opportunities there. If you see adjunct faculty, that also means they have an appointment at another location. That may or may not carry too much meaning. For example, in this department, often that's an adjunct with the Salk Institute, which is right down the road, and that is not prohibitive at all from working in their lab. So you can go on down, assistant, associate professor, and full professor. Those just have to do with what stage of their career these professors are in, but really also for your perspective in joining a lab doesn't necessarily mean all that much. You'll also notice that for many of them, they have at the bottom their lab links. That is where you're going to get more information typically than at the first link where their name is. So I'm going to click on Dr. Christina Towers down here. And this is going to be very similar to what it is for all faculty, where it will list a biography, some select publications, an email address. But instead of just stopping here, what I would do is go to their lab webpage. So if we click on the Towers Lab webpage, you'll see this is through the Salk Institute, where she has a dual appointment. And that first page gives you a nice overview of the type of research that she does. And so she studies cellular recycling processes in cancer cells, autophagy specifically. Now, if you click on through and research, it might give you a little bit more detail or different types of projects that they're doing. And even though every lab has a totally different, potentially, website design, they're usually going to be structured quite similarly. So you'll find a research section that's quite common. You'll find a publication section. And there are a couple places that I would definitely check out when you're looking for a research position. One that I always like to check out is there's often a link for the people in the lab. Who are the lab members? And as I scroll down, you can see there's Dr. Towers up top. But as we scroll, we see that there are also undergraduates on this page. There are PhD, postdocs. You can see there are a large number of undergraduates, staff members, postdocs. And I think anytime you find a lab in which undergraduates are on and featured on the lab website, that is a very positive sign that this is a professor that values mentorship. Now, I've met Dr. Towers. I know she highly values mentorship. But I think in general, if you look at a website that lists undergraduates, talks about their passions, shows a recent picture, that shows that they are invested in making sure that they're part of the community, which is hopefully something that you can feel in the lab that you join. Another thing that is somewhat rare, but is an amazing thing to see, is the lab philosophy, in which she talks about her lab mission, a training philosophy, and actually explicitly talks about the concept of mentorship and what that means in a lab. Now, if a lab does not mention this, that doesn't necessarily constitute a red flag. It's often quite rare. But when you do see it, I think it is a very good nod to the priority that the PI puts into mentorship. If you want to look a little bit more into research that they've done or what they've accomplished, there might be news or press releases. You can look at recent publications. And then if there is a join us or contact us link, always go there. Because junior research technicians, postdoctoral, contact us. We require at least a 2-year commitment. With all of these, and it may or may not indicate undergraduates, but it might list out some of the requirements that are necessary for joining or being a volunteer in that lab. And also, gives you the proper email address to apply or to contact the lab. So let's say now you have a list of 3, 4, 5 faculty, and you say, you know what, I want to reach out. I want to have the chance of working in this lab. I'm excited about what they do. How do I do it? And this is going to be the art of the cold email. It's a cold email because they probably don't know who you are. So you are sending them an email out of the blue, and they don't know they're receiving it. They don't know who you are. So this truly is your first introduction, and you're asking something pretty big. You want to be able to research in their lab. So writing a good cold email is important. Let's go through some of those important things to have in there. One, and this is the top one, be honestly enthusiastic and curious about them and their research. This email needs to be personalized. Not just why do you want to be in research, but why do you want to be in their research lab? And this requires not just kind of looking at their webpage, taking a couple of key terms and throwing them in and say, I find this fascinating. This means going into their research papers or on their lab website, or if there are any videos or talks or what you can see, and then taking the specifics of what they do and connecting that to your own interests. So I find what you do fascinating because of my connection to it for X, Y, and Z reason. And if you're not feeling it, if you aren't honestly and deeply interested in what they're doing, then find another lab. This is going to be the most important thing, is be honest about your excitement for being in that lab. It's important because being in any lab is going to be hard work. And any lab wants individuals that are dedicated and invested in the work they're doing, which truly comes from being passionate about it. You are the main character. So even though you want to talk about their research and why you find it to be important, don't spend the whole email talking about how amazing that PI is. Rather, this is about you. And don't be afraid to make it about what you can do and what your goals are and what you want to do. This can be what you're willing to dedicate to the lab in terms of time. This can be your own prior experience, which could be stuff that you've learned in an undergraduate lab, like a teaching lab like Build 4, or in a lecture course. This could be any bit of past experience or interest that makes you the main character of the email. Demonstrate effort. Right? Write things in there that show very clearly that you read some of their research, that you spent more than 5 minutes glancing through their website and copying and pasting some buzzwords. Show them that you really took the time to think about their research and what they do and why you like it. Be clear and succinct. So don't write an essay. This should be a very short, to the point, clear email. And when you do write it, end up reading it backwards and asking yourself, not backwards, reading it back to yourself and ask, would a real person say that? Or does this seem like some kind of form letter that has no personality or character at all? Now, I'm going to show you a tool that you can use to generate a draft of a good cold email. And I'll show you what's good about it, but I'm also going to show you where it goes wrong. And it goes wrong in response to this. What would a real person say? Here we have a ChatGPT prompt in which I asked it a clear question. You are an undergraduate pre-med biology major at UCSD and are interested in writing a cold email to Christina Towers, Assistant Adjunct Professor in Biological Sciences in the Salk Institute. Please write an optimal professional email with the goal of becoming a volunteer research assistant in her lab. Now, this isn't an optimized prompt. You can feel free to take it and change it however you would like, but it's something that in response gets a pretty decent email. Now I want to go through this very briefly and go through what it does right and what it does poorly. One of the things that it does incredibly well is that it is formal, it is professional, and it is well edited. So no spelling errors, anything like that. The subject is direct and to the point. Request for volunteer research assistant position in your laboratory. It doesn't have to be exactly that, and you can see I've asked that same prompt to the model a couple of times, and because of how AI works, it will give slightly different answers for that also each time. So you can do it a couple of times and see what it gives you, and you can also ask for it to change its tone or anything specific. But as we go through, you are identifying who you are. So here's my name, I'm majoring in this, I go to this school, and I want to be potentially in your lab. And then in here, okay, this is where you talk about how you are interested in their research, what the research is, and all of that. And then a little bit more about yourself, your qualifications, what it takes to be able to succeed. And I'll also include in the links in the description, I'll include links to some blogs online that also describe how to write a cold email. Take thank them for taking the time to consider. And then also, it's a good idea for you to be pretty clear about what you are able to give them. Maybe you can say that, hey, I have at least a year to work in this lab, or I can dedicate 10 to 15 hours per week in this lab. A couple of things of note, and I think this is where these letters really fall flat, is that, let's say we, here we go. I'm going to look at this sentence. I'm writing to express my sincere interest in the research conducted in your lab, particularly with respect to your work on cellular senescence and its potential implications in cancer biology. So let me ask you, have you ever had a conversation with somebody and they've been like, you know what I'm excited about today? Cellular senescence and the implications for cancer biology. I know it's a little bit over the top, but it's a buzzword that, keep in mind, ChatGPT doesn't know you. I just gave it a random prompt. So it is literally coming up with a form letter that has no personality whatsoever in it. And it's taking some buzzwords from her research published online. So yes, she does work on cellular senescence, how cells die. But that isn't something that is really particularly personal. And well, why are you excited about cellular senescence, right? Like, why that rather than something else? Or why the technique that she works on rather than something else? Make the connection between their research and your interests a real honest one, that if you're having a conversation with a normal human, it would make sense, right? Like, yeah, I'm excited about this because of X, Y, and Z, right? Be honest about that. And you don't need to worry about conveying a bunch of technical expertise, like using big words or I know all of this stuff. No, it is much more effective and much better, and what they want to just hear that excitement and get a feeling that you are up to the responsibility and task of dedicating yourself to this research, rather than having a bunch of technical expertise. And lastly, don't undersell yourself. You know, if you might think that, oh, I've never worked in a research lab before, well, you may have done things in class where in lecture you learned about a certain technique, or you may have taken an undergraduate lab class, or you may have done something over the summer, or had a summer job where you had supervisory responsibilities. Take those things and don't be afraid to quite clearly and succinctly roll out what you've done. It is going to benefit you, and in this case, you want to showcase who you are and why their lab will benefit from your presence and your efforts. Well, and really lastly, rejection is the norm. So if you send this email, don't feel bad if you don't hear back. As principal investigators, as researchers, as faculty, as teachers, they are incredibly busy. It may be a while before they get to your email in their inbox. And even then, it may not be something that they end up responding to. So don't take it personally. It doesn't mean that they think poorly of you. It doesn't mean that even anything was wrong with the email that you sent. Rejection is the norm. What I would recommend is that once you send it, if you don't hear anything, send it again a week later and just resend the email. Maybe it's something that they just missed, and a week later, it's something that they will see. Once you send it a second time and you don't hear back, then I would move on and look for another lab. And this is something where realistically, you might have to end up contacting 5, 10, 20, 30 different labs before you find one that's a right fit for you and you find a position. But I've been doing this since 2009, talking to undergrads, watching them go through this process, and any student that has ever dedicated themselves to trying and really not giving up on the cold email or applying for a scholarship approach invariably has gotten a position. They've gotten something that that connects with their goals and interests. Now, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me. We can talk about this further. And definitely, please check out all the links in the description. There are so many resources and so many things that we did not talk about in this video that are important for this process. It can really help you along. Thanks.